Okay, so last class we did a Desmos activity where we were finding the translations and seeing that translations were just a slide, right, to another location. And the two images and the pre-image were going to be congruent to each other. We said this one was a slide and this one was not a slide because the object turned. So if you remember in that Desmos, we aren't able to turn anything or flip, only slide. And this is on the top of page 4. We see that we have a pre-image. This was the pre-image. And we know it's a pre-image because it's just labeled A, B, and C. So that is the original spot. And then this is the image. And as you can see, they have these little prime symbols on them. They look like apostrophe symbols. And that lets us know that started out as the pre-image and then it moved 4 units to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 units down, 1, 2, 3. So if you weren't here on the last class on Friday, that's what we're doing, moving 4 units right and 3 units down. And we said there's a couple other ways to write this with arrow notation. The X axis, right? This is the x-axis. We can move right or left. If we're moving to the right, that's becoming more positive. So we're going to do x plus 4. And then on the y-axis, you can go up or down. Up is the positive, down is negative. So if we're going down 3, it'd be y minus 3. And then we can also write it as an ordered pair, a capital T for translation, and then 4, negative 3. So today's lesson, we're going to really focus on how to write these translations and how to do a translation. So notice it says, translate the triangle 3 units right and 3 units down. They also gave us the arrow notation right here. And if I wanted to, I could write it as an ordered pair. 3 to the right is the x-axis and 3 down is the y-axis. So we have a pre-image here, J, L, and K. And I'm just going to note the coordinates here of the pre-image. So negative 1, 3, negative 1, 1, and negative 4, 1. Those are the coordinates of J, K, and L right now. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can move the pre-image to the image. One way is take J and count 3 units to the right, 1, 2, 3, 3 units down, 1, 2, 3. And here's where J prime would be. And J prime, that was the coordinate 2, 0. So we could do that with each one. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's K prime. And then 1, 2, 3 to the right, 1, 2, 3 down, L prime. And then I'm going to use my straight line. If I can find the straight line. Shapes, line. Okay. And I'm going to connect this straight line tool. So if you're using a Desmos, a formative, or something like that, you're going to use the straight line tool. If you're doing it on paper, like you should be right now, you should use a straight edge of some sort. The corner of a folder, a book, your index card from the first day of school when we did the name project, something to have a straight edge. Now, the other coordinates, K prime is at 2, negative 2, and L prime is at negative 1, negative 2. There's something that we should note here. When we did that Desmos the other day, some of you picked up on a pattern that if I take those x, y coordinates, right, and for every x value I add 3, every y value I subtract 3. So if I add 3 here and subtract 3, negative 1 plus 3 is 2. 3 minus 3 is 0. Let's see if it works for the other ones. Negative 1 plus 3 does give me 2. 1 minus 3 does give me negative 2. And then the last one, negative 4 plus 3 does give me negative 1. And 1 minus 3 does give me negative 2. So if you wanted to use the rule for the translations to find the coordinates first and then plot those points, you could do that, and that would work as well. Notice that when I made these two triangles, the triangles are congruent. Two triangles are congruent. And that's really important. If your triangles do not look congruent, then you probably made a mistake with plotting a point or connecting. All right, so the top of page 5, we have another example here. It says graph D prime, E prime, F prime, the image of triangle DEF after a translation 1 unit right and 3 units down. So first, pause the video and try to write the translation rule using arrow notation for 1 unit right and 3 units down. Remember, on the x-axis, we can go right or left, and on the y-axis, we go up or down. Okay, so arrow notation starts with the ordered pair x, y, and then it has an arrow, and then you start with x. And if we're going right, that's the positive 1, right? And 3 units down would be a negative. So that's what your arrow notation should look like. Now, again, you have 2 ways to do this. You can count 1 to the right and 3 down, 1, 2, 3, and then label that E prime. 1 to the right, 3 down, 1, 2, 3. That would be F prime. And 1 to the right, 3 down, 1, 2, 3. And that would be D prime. And then I'm just going to connect those. And there's my figure. Or I can pay attention to that function rule. And I could list the pre-image coordinates. So like D was at -5, 1. So -5, right? -5, 1. So if I add 1 to -5, I get -4. And if I subtract 3 from 1, I get -2. And look at, that's where D prime is. That's where we plotted it, -4, -2. And then E was at -3, 6. If I take -3 and add 1, I get -2. And if I take 6 and subtract 3, I get +3. And that is where my E prime is located, -2, +3. And the same thing with point F. F is at 1, 0 right now. If I take 1 and add 1, I get 2. And if I take 0 and subtract 3, I get -3, which is where F prime is. So either method will work, and might depend on what the function rule or the translation rule is on how you do the method. Now it says if the measure of angle E is 45 degrees, what is the measure of angle E prime? So again, pause the video, maybe talk to your partner, think about what the answer would be and why. Okay, so if you said the measure of angle E prime equals 45 degrees, you are correct. Because translations produce congruent figures and congruent figures have corresponding congruent angles. And we've heard that phrase before, corresponding congruent angles, when we talked about similar triangles in the last unit. So corresponding angles are the angles that match up. So D and D prime, E and E prime, F and F prime. Those are going to be congruent to each other in both congruent figures and similar figures. Angles are always staying congruent. So if you did not copy that down, pause the video and copy that. All right, example 2, figure V is the image of figure U. So let's just shade in with our pencil lightly figure U. That's our pre-image, and we're moving to figure V. You always want to figure out which way you're moving to, which one came first and which one came second, because that will affect your translation rule. Now, it says find the rule for the translation. So why don't you right now try to write the translation rule. And try to write all 3 ways, but if you can only get one of the 3 ways, that's fine. And again, your ways are right back on page 4 in the top there. In words, arrow notation, or an ordered pair. Come up with a translation rule of how do we go from figure U to figure V. Remember, we have to go to the matching point. Okay, so pause the video and write the rule. Okay, so one way we could do this is we can pick a point that's corresponding on each. So I'm going to pick the top of that point. So obviously we're going to go left first, right? Because this is our pre-image and this is our image. So we have to count the units left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gets me at the same height, right? So 7 units left. Now, if I'm going left, that's a negative direction on the x-axis, right? Then I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units down. So that's also a negative. So let's see. If I'm writing this as arrow notation, X is going left 7, so that's going to be negative 7. Y is going down 6, so that's also going to be negative. And then as an ordered pair, negative 7, negative 6 for X and Y. And those are the 3 ways you could have written the rule, and kudos to anybody who got all 3 ways done. If you find that you're always like a one-off, if you went left 8 units or went left 6 units, you might be counting wrong. So remember, you're counting the lines and you're starting with the line after and then going across. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can't really see my coordinates very much. Maybe it's 7. Hopefully your graph is a little bit darker than what mine is. Okay. So if the perimeter of figure V is about 13.8 units, what's the perimeter of figure U? So again, pause the video, turn and talk to the person next to you, have something written down. Okay. I just wanted to go back here. I can see this a little bit clearer. So this is going from here to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice for any corresponding points, it should work out the same. So if you couldn't see the top very well, the bottom might work out. Okay, so if you said the perimeter of figure U would also be 13.8 units, because translations produce congruent figures. And remember, the word congruent means identical, right? Same size, same shape. So, of course, if they're congruent figures, their perimeters are also going to be the same. So pause that video and make sure you have that written down before going on to page 6. All right, in example 3, again, we're going to describe the rule in words and then try arrow notation. If you want to put the ordered pair there too, that'd be great. And then answer about the area and the angles. So for example 3, And you could do example 4. So pause the video, try examples 3 and 4 on your own, and then we'll check your answers as we go. Okay, so the first step in writing the rule is I'm going to identify which one of these is the preimage. So I'm going to shade in my preimage here. My preimage is going to be the one that does not have the prime symbols. So that's my preimage, and I'm moving to my one that has the prime symbols. So I'm going to go from D to D prime. I'm going to count. I'm going to go right and left first and then up and down because of my ordered pair. Ooh, my pen is not cooperating. It goes X and then Y, right? So if I go X, I have to go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units right. And then I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 units up. So in words, I went right 7, up 4. In arrow notation, oh my goodness, this is right is positive, right? Because we're going to the positive, and up is to the positive, so Y plus 4. And anybody who did the ordered pair, I'll write that over here. It's a capital T, and then the subscript is a positive 7, positive 4. Those are your 3 ways to write the rule. Now, part B says the area of triangle DEF is 7 square units. What is the area of D prime, E prime, F prime? So the area of triangle D prime, E prime, F prime is also, please excuse my stylus is definitely not cooperating, 7 units squared, because translations produce congruent figures. If anybody misses any of these notes, remember that it's posted in your calendar in November. Just click on the notes that say pages 4, 5, and 6, and you can get the answer key there too if you can't read my writing. Now, if the measure of angle D is 28 degrees, what is the measure of angle D prime? That would also be measure of angle D prime equals 28 degrees because translations produce congruent figures, and the corresponding angles of congruent figures are congruent. So again, having that corresponding angles are congruent and congruent figures is going to be the theme over and over again. So if you have to explain it on a test or a quiz, you're thinking about that. The corresponding angles are congruent, the corresponding sides are congruent of congruent figures, and translations are a rigid motion, which means they produce congruent figures. Okay, so again, if you haven't had a chance to do example 4, pause the video and do example 4. It says, tell if a translation took place in the below examples. If you answer yes, write the translation rule. So if you didn't write the translation rule, again, pause the video and write the translation rule. Okay, so in the first one here, we're going to see, okay, it looks like a translation occurred because here's my W and my W prime, my X prime, my Y prime, my Z prime, right? And if I go to do the translation rule, if I count from one of the preimages from W to W prime, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 units right or left, and 1, 2, 3 units down. From x to x prime, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And the same for y to y prime and z to z prime. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4 units to the left and 3 units down for each one of these. So that's how I know that it is a translation, because every point moved the same amount, the same direction. So the two figures are congruent. Yes, the figure slid left 4 units. Oh my goodness. And 3 units down. If I wrote the translation rule as arrow notation, it'd be x minus 4, y minus 3. Okay. Ugh, my stylus. So again, if you're having trouble reading my writing because the stylus not cooperating, then please pull up the answer key. Now this one here, the pre-image is this large one here, right? And then the image is this smaller. This was a reduction in size, right? They got smaller. So this would be a no. And the reason is the size changed. So it can't be a translation, right? Once the size changes, it can't be a translation. So the figures have to be congruent. Okay. So at this point, we're done with the notes for today. If you did not do the Desmos the other day, then you'll want to make sure that you do the Desmos. And I can't bring that up. I don't know how to bring that up on here. Here it is. Okay. So the Desmos that you had to go through and do the figures here, it was called Translations with Coordinates. And a lot of you got to this table here where you figured out that if you add 5 to the right to go 5, add 5 to the x coordinates, and then 3 units up would be add 3 to the y coordinates. Then you can go and do that same thing with the coordinates in the second table. And then you can think about these rules as well. So if you did not finish slides 9 and 10, you could work on that. And then after that, you can do the pumpkin carving Desmos. Okay? Have a great day, and come see me if you have any questions.